and very good evening. I shall be presenting to you on the evaluation of the eyelid malposition. Basically, I'll be taking you through ptosis, entropion, and ectropion evaluation. Ptosis can occur in all ages, and when a patient presents with droopy eyelids, we need to remember that it is mainly a sign and not a diagnosis. So we need to evaluate ptosis to find out the cause and arrive at the management plan. History is very important. The age of onset usually helps us to classify the ptosis into a congenital one and an acquired one. The history of diurnal variation and double vision usually points out towards the diagnosis of neuromuscular junctional disorders like myasthenia. We need to ask about the history of abnormal eye and facial movements. For example, this kid, when presented with a jaw winking phenomena, the diagnosis is quite obvious. It's a Marcus-Gunn jaw winking phenomenon. Sometimes patients may also present with complaints of droopy eyelids when they actually have some abnormal facial eye movements, facial dystonias like hemifacial spasm or apraxia of eyelid opening or benign essential blepharospasm. History of trauma is very important. It can cause ptosis in a variety of ways, like a levator disinsertion or a third nerve palsy. History is again important. When this child presented to us with droopy eyelids, he also gave history of double vision in up gaze. So we went ahead with scanning, which showed a fractured fragment which is impinging on the superior rectus, causing elevation deficit. So history is again all important in proper diagnosis. History of orbital surgeries and lid surgeries, again very important. When we have failed surgery like this, the patient is not happy with the outcome, we need to carefully evaluate the primary surgical plan. What we see here is a globe hypotropia, that is gross elevation deficit, and also he has Marcus-Gunn jaw winking phenomenon. A simple frontalis sling alone will not take care of this kind of complex situation. History of repeated lid swelling, as in this lady who has got repeated inflammatory lid swelling causing some skin changes, atrophy of fat, and levator dehiscence. Diagnosis classical blepharochalasis. Family history is very important. Again, we have familial syndromic ptosis conditions like blepharophimosis and myotonic dystrophies, which can run in families. We should not forget asking about the use of contact lens and the recent use of injection botulinum toxin when a patient presents with ptosis. Use of anesthetic agents and its adverse reaction in the family in the past, we need to document that properly. History of bleeding tendencies is again important history. Systemic history is very important. Patient may not bother to tell us about recent onset of dysphagia or a climbing difficulty to us, to ophthalmologists when they present for lateral ptosis evaluation, but that could be a clinching point in ocular myasthenia or myasthenia gravis. When we do our ophthalmic evaluation, we should start with checking vision and recording it. We need to discuss, many of these patients can also have astigmatism and amblyopia, and that has to be clearly discussed with the patient before we intervene surgically. Head posture is another thing that we need to check. Patients may present with head tilt or chin up position. In severe ptosis, we can find some compensatory mechanisms like brow elevation or chin up position to clear the visual axis. The presence or absence of lid crease is another important point. The absence of lid crease usually points out towards the congenital ptosis, and the high or receding lid crease points towards the aponeurotic type of ptosis. On down gaze, when we examine, if the patients with congenital ptosis, usually there is lid lag on down gaze. That is because of the dystrophy of the levator muscle. Whereas in case of aponeurotic ptosis, there is lid droop on down gaze. Ocular movements are very important so that we do not miss out on congenital complex ptosis and the neurogenic ptosis, the worrisome part of the ptosis. For example, in this patient, a classical congenital monoocular elevation deficit, wherein there is globe hypotropia and there is elevation deficit. So here the management plan would be to correct the hypotropia first, followed by ptosis correction. The neurogenic ptosis is one thing that we should not miss. Here is a patient with a classical third nerve palsy. presenting with ptosis and limitation of ocular movements, depression, elevation, and adduction. Any significant anisocoria, we need to evaluate these patients immediately with radiodiagnosis. MRI or MRA would be preferred to rule out the PCOM aneurysm, which is the most common thing. Patient with aberrant regeneration following third nerve palsy can usually present with lid retraction on down gaze, so otherwise called as a pseudo-vangraphy sign. Again, the treatment would be really tricky in these patients. As I mentioned, there is pupillary examination is another important point that we should not miss. It helps us diagnose the third nerve palsy and Horner syndrome. Phenylephrine test is useful in case of mild ptosis or patients presenting with Horner syndrome. Corneal sensation and dry eye evaluation should be to complete the ptosis evaluation. Bell's phenomena is very important. If there is poor Bell's phenomena, we might have to defer ptosis surgery at all. When the history is inconclusive, we might have to review the old photographs to get a clear idea about the onset of ptosis. Moving on to the quantification of ptosis with simple measurements like this, the palpebral fissure height, wherein we do with a simple ruler from upper eyelid to the lower eyelid across the pupillary reflex, that gives us the approximate height of the palpebral fissure height. And the difference between the two eyes usually gives the amount of ptosis. The second important measurement that we make is a marginal reflex distance 1, which is measured from the lid margin, upper eyelid margin to the light reflex. Normally it would be around 4 to 5 millimeter. Another important measurement would be the marginal reflex distance 2, which is done from the corneal reflex to the lower eyelid. So this is the marginal reflex distance 2. By making these measurements, we could find out the difference in MRD. The difference between the MRD of the two eyelids would give us the approximate amount of ptosis, and we can classify the ptosis into mild, moderate, and severe based on this. If it is less than 2 millimeter difference, then it falls into the mild variety. If it is more than 4, it falls into the severe variety. The all-important measurement in a case of ptosis would be a LPS action, the amount of LPS action based on which we perform our surgical correction. So this is done from the maximal down gaze position to the maximal upward up gaze position after negating the action of the frontalis. Less than 4 millimeter would indicate that there is a poor levator function, and more than 15 would be an excellent levator function. Levator function in a child is very difficult to measure. The indirect clue would be the presence of lid crease, which says that there is an adequate amount of levator function. Or the other words, presence of anomalous head posture again points out that it can be associated with poor levator function in a child. When we are suspecting neuromuscular junctional disorders like ocular myasthenia, simple tests like an ice pack test would be helpful, like wherein we make all ptosis measurements, then keep ice pack over the closed eyelid for about 2 minutes, redo the ptosis measurement. Any improvement in ptosis by about 2 millimeters usually points out that there is an associated ocular myasthenia. Another simple test would be to do a fatigue test, wherein we ask the patient to look up for about 30 seconds without blinking. The prolonged up gaze usually worsens the ptosis if it is ocular myasthenia, as in this patient. Once we are done with the measurements, we need to rule out these mimickers. One is the contralateral eyelid retraction, as we get to see in thyroid eye disease. The second thing is a brow ptosis, as in this patient. The third would be more common condition, the redundant upper eyelid skin, otherwise a dermatochalasis. There are simple upper lid mass like a capillary hemangioma, which can be easily treated with topical and oral beta blockers. Neurofibromatosis, which causes an S-shaped ptosis and associated with capillary spots. And our history should guide us towards the towards the diagnosis of post-traumatic enophthalmos, wherein there is enophthalmos and movement restriction as well. Moving on to the evaluation of ectropion and entropion. Normally, our lid margin is a square-shaped structure which is in close opposition to the globe, and the change from the lid margin to the conjunctiva is quite abrupt. As we age, there are different involutional changes that happens around the eye. One is the canthal laxity, this descent of the canthal position. There is also shortening of the intercommissural distance, and there is redundancy of the orbital septum and skin. All these changes might result in ectropion, which is an outward turned eyelid, or entropion, wherein the eyelid margin is turned inwards. A patient with ectropion can present with different manifestations like this, like chronically inflamed conjunctiva. In long-standing cases, it can as well go for keratinization also. There can be an exposure keratopathy. More commonly, they can present with punctal, lacrimal pump failure, and sometimes there can be post-traumatic conditions. We can expect this kind of cicatricial ectropion, wherein a scar is tend to pull the lid margin outwards. The entropion, which is more symptomatic than ectropion, can usually present with this kind of bunched out lower lid tissue, wherein there is overriding of this preseptal orbicularis over the dorsal orbicularis. There can be ocular inflammation because of the constant rubbing of the eyelashes against the globe. There can be also the canthal dehiscence from its normal position. And when we examine closely, we can have a deeper pharyngeal area, and there is an yellowish line which says there is detached inferior retractors. Many of these patients can also have fat atrophy and enophthalmos as well. Mind you, these kind of changes are expected in involutional entropion, which usually affects the lower eyelid. But if we get an upper eyelid entropion, we need to carefully examine the eyelids and conjunctival surface for symblepharon formation like this to rule out other cicatricial conditions involving the conjunctiva. Very simple test that can be done to evaluate the thing would be to assess the medial canthal laxity, wherein we pull the lid laterally, and lateral canthal laxity, and lid distraction test where we pull the lid outwards, and anything more than 6 millimeters usually says that there is horizontal laxity. The other simple test would be to do a snapback test, wherein we pull the lid outwards and allow it to snap back to its original position. If it doesn't snap back to its original position without a blink, or it takes some time to go back to its original position, that again indicates that there is horizontal lid laxity. So to conclude, by doing a detailed evaluation, we can find out the type of malposition that we are dealing with. By performing the relevant clinical test, we can assess the severity of the condition, and also we can exclude the mimickers. We can formulate a proper management plan which would be successful cosmetically and functionally. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya. We'll talk. Dr. Akshay?
Yeah, I think one of the questions that we have received is, what is the preferred management plan in Marcus-Gunn ptosis, in basically ptosis with Marcus-Gunn phenomenon?
I think Madam is going to cover that part of it. Dr. Usha Kim will be covering that anyway, but Marcus-Gunn jaw winking phenomena, we need to check the flutters, and we need to discuss with the patient that we may not be able to abolish the Marcus-Gunn jaw winking phenomenon completely. The preferred management would be to do a levator disinsertion followed by frontalis laying. That would be the procedure of choice.
Right.
Dr. Usha, do you have any question to ask? PG related?
No, I think I will subsequently cover the management. So if you can stop sharing, Vidya, I can.
Yes, ma'am.